Webinars and virtual events have been used as marketing tools and lead generation tools for a long time now. But with the pandemic that happened in 2020 and all the way up to 2022, they became even more increasingly popular. And today we're going to talk about how you can use a webinar to build leads and get more clients for your accounting firm. Hey there, I'm Brighton, the Accountant's Marketing Mentor, and I help accountants just like you elevate their marketing so they can grow their accounting, bookkeeping, and financial planning businesses. Webinars can be an incredibly powerful lead generation and marketing tool. And the reason why is that it allows you to get higher quality leads, actually capture information from those leads, and also position yourself as a thought leader within your space. So before we dive into how to host your webinar, let's quickly chat about the benefits of hosting a webinar. Hosting a webinar versus strictly posting a video gives you the opportunity to capture leads and their information. Most importantly, their email address. And when you get that email address, they have consented to you marketing to them. I've talked about that in previous videos. So one of the most important things that you can do is provide opportunities for people to engage with you, engage with your firm, and engage with information that you share, and kind of having a bit of what we call a paywall, but instead of somebody having to pay money to do that, they have to give up their email address. And Donald Miller, who is the author of Building a Storybrand, talks about the value of an email address to the actual end user, the consumer. And they will give up their email address for something that they perceive valuable around the amount of $15 to $20. So if you can provide substantially more information and more valuable information at a level that is higher than the equivalent of $15 to $20, they're more likely to give you that email address. So when you're thinking about what type of content to share, think about what value you're going to be providing to your audience of your webinar. So that's one of the biggest, most important benefits of hosting a webinar is you're able to create a medium and an opportunity for leads, people that are interested in potentially hiring your firm to be their accountant, to engage with you, give you their email address, and because they've done that, you can then directly communicate to them. So that's one of the biggest benefits. The second biggest benefit is it positions yourself as a thought leader. You have a lot of knowledge, you have a lot of expertise, and sharing that with your target audience and your clients better positions you as a leader. So people want to work with people they can trust. They want to work with people that are knowledgeable. And if you host consistent webinars and produce content that again adds value to your clients and your potential clients, they're more likely to do business with you. They're more likely to retain you on a long-term basis and consistently be your client if you continue to add value. So those are the two biggest benefits. First, you get leads. You get people registering for their webinar, giving you their name and their email so that you can market to them consistently afterwards, and you position yourself as a thought leader. Something else that you can do after you've hosted your webinar from a content perspective is break it down into micro content. We've talked about doing that on many other episodes of Accountant Marketing Mentor, and could be another pillar. So this could be another pillar. It gives you the opportunity to host an entire webinar. You could do an interview, you could do a presentation, you could do a panel. There's so many different ways to produce content for a webinar. And one thing that you can do is take that webinar and then break it down into shorter clips, into quotes, and potentially even images that you can then share on social media. It gives you the opportunity to get a little bit more mileage out of that piece of content. Planning your webinar is the next thing we want to talk about. So you have an idea, you want to talk about that concept, that idea, provide that value. Now what? So you've got your idea, you've got your plan. Now you need to start thinking about how you're going to capture registrations. Are you going to do that through a form on your website? Are you going to use a webinar tool? And I'll talk about some in the next section of this video. Are you going to use that webinar tool to capture those registrations? And then you got to start thinking, what day of the week, what time of day? We have typically done over the lunch hour. We kind of start around 11:45, which then gives people the opportunity to, kind of take an early lunch, but then still have a little bit of time to relax before their next meeting at 1, but it may be different for your target audience. So you got to kind of maybe test a little bit as to when is best for your webinar to be aired. The other thing you need to think about is speakers. Who's going to be talking? Who's going to be sharing the value? And it doesn't always have to be you. You can bring in experts to talk about specific topics that you may not be an expert on. You might be, but you might not be, to then add that additional value to your clients. So let's just pull back the lens a little bit here and think, if you have an accounting firm whose clientele is primarily business owners, you don't always have to share tax-related information with them, especially within these webinars. What you can do is bring in, a performance coach. So like a mental coach or a business coach. You could bring in a marketing specialist to come and talk about marketing. Anything that has to do with being a business owner. Not only just running a business, but being a business owner, how you balance your personal and professional life. All of those topics can be really interesting and beneficial and valuable to your clients and potential clients. So think about speakers, think about topics, and think about your target audience. Again, what would they find value in? Like I said, next you need to figure out your registration pages. Are you gathering registrations through your website through a form and then having that link to a YouTube link as an example of where you're going to host the webinar? You need to figure out how you're capturing that information and then sending out the invite for the actual live stream or the actual webinar. Then, if you feel like you're confident enough and ready to take the plunge into advertising, you can advertise for your webinar as well. So think about, if you want to attract more new eyeballs to your webinar, to your business, this is a great way to do it, because you can advertise for the event. It's all about value. You're not really about selling anything at this point in the marketing funnel. All you want to do is add value, add value, add value. And you can target people similar to the clients that you already have on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok if you want, to get to that point where you're offering something that is of value to new eyeballs, to people that aren't clients yet. So that could be that next step. So you have got your plan, you know who's speaking, what your topic is. You've got registrations down. Now you need to figure out how you're actually going to broadcast your webinar. There's a couple different ways of doing this. You can do it live, and we do live webinars for some of our clients, but you can also pre-record them. So there are some cases and some tools that allow you to pre-record a webinar, a conversation, or a panel discussion, upload that, and then have it premiere at a specified time that you give the software, and then it automatically runs itself. The pluses of that are you're not as worried about messing up, saying something wrong, getting into any issues with what you say, and you're not able to you are able to edit things before you post it and go live. The downside of that is that you don't necessarily have the live engagement and interaction that you could have in a live event. So if you have a question that comes top of your head, you could ask that out to your audience. They could then, answer in the chat, and you can really engage with them. You can't really do that if you have a pre-recorded webinar. So just a couple things to consider there. So let's talk about webinar platforms for a minute. Software is going to be a huge piece of your webinar strategy. And you likely don't have a 3-camera setup like I have going on right now, where I've got a camera down there taking a big wide shot, the A cam right here that I'm talking to, and then this lovely B camera over here taking all of these different angles. And it's really helpful to have this kind of setup when you've got multiple people that are talking on a webinar. And so we have done webinars right here in this spot, live stream them, and I've had 2 people, sometimes I'm anticipating we're going to have more than 2 sitting in this spot, doing a webinar, having a discussion, and I'm able to cut between the 3 angles. So that's kind of that premier level, that top level. And personally, we use Vimeo webinars. This isn't paid or anything like that, but I have really enjoyed using Vimeo's webinar platform, and we use the enterprise level because we're doing a decent amount of those. So that is what we use, but there are some other more budget-friendly solutions that you can look into as well. The first more budget-friendly solution is YouTube live streaming, and it's free. So what I've done in the past for my own webinars when I was starting at Heart, I was doing webinars for, a few years ago when I was starting at Hard and wasn't really primarily focused on accounting firms quite yet. I had just finished, wrapping up a career in music and started doing webinars for the music community during COVID because they weren't really able to do shows. I thought, how can I help a community I really care about? And I was able to host webinars on YouTube. So how I did that was I had my email software that I used to send all the invites out. I had a registration page on my website, and that registration form actually then linked to my email marketing software that then triggered an automatic link email. So that email included the link to the live stream on YouTube. Maybe we'll do a little graphic to explain kind of the process there. So first, what we would do is create the form. So anybody that wanted to sign up for that webinar would fill out that form. Then what they would do is get an email that was triggered from my email software that sent them the link to the webinar. So that's what we did. And then people clicked on that link and it went to an unlisted live stream on YouTube that allowed them to actually watch the event. I produced that through OBS, which is a free software that you can use to, use your webcams or your DSLRs and use them as your cameras for your live stream. So that's getting a little granular, a little technical, but that's how I've produced and hosted and actually ran an entire webinar all by myself, and I'm sure you could figure it out too. So there's other videos online that can actually get into the details of how to do that, and I'm sure there's a ton on YouTube here, but that's just one way that you can get up and running right away and host a webinar. So a couple others are Zoom. Zoom is probably one of the most used video conferencing tools out there, and not to mention, as the pandemic kind of took off, so did Zoom. Everybody needed a video conferencing portal. Everybody needed a video conferencing solution, and Zoom ended up kind of taking the cake and becoming the king of video conferencing for that time. So you can host webinars on Zoom. They've got webinar specific packages. So if you're already subscribed to Zoom, then it could be a good solution for you. I've never used it personally, but I have attended webinars within Zoom and it seems to work just fine. So that's one solution. And these other solutions are specific to webinars. That's what the software is designed for. So they've actually got webinar in their name, 2 of them. And there are countless software solutions out there for webinars. And these 2 just have webinar in their name. So first is GoToWebinar. The other is Webinar Jam. I've seen these out there before. I've never used them. But from the feature set that I've read and done some research on, what they allow you to do is have registrations in the same place, host your webinar in the same place, and also send emails from the same place. So that example that I talked about earlier with YouTube of having to set up the form, set up the connection with my email marketing software, and then send that link to YouTube, all that work plus the work of having to produce something and use free software and integrate my cameras and all that kind of stuff is packaged into one solution. That may be the best way to go if you decide that webinars are going to be a key part of your marketing strategy. It may be an investment that makes a lot more sense because you've got a bit of an out-of-the-box webinar tool. A tool like that would allow you to get started right away and hit the ground running. So check out a couple different softwares, but those are 2 that I've heard a lot about. I've seen the feature set. Granted, I haven't used them, but it sounds like they can do a lot of what you need in order to host a successful webinar. So you're hosting your webinar. How do you make it successful and engaging? There are a couple ways that you can do this. First is engaging your audience during the webinar. Q&A sessions, polls, just asking general questions, engaging in the chat. Those are all great ways to make people more engaged within your webinar. The last thing you want is somebody tuning out because they're bored and they start picking up their phone and scrolling through Instagram, or just exit out because they're not actually getting any value, or they're not actually excited about the topic, or you're not engaging them and inviting them into the conversation. It's a really great way. A lot of these tools actually have built-in polls, Q&As, chats to give you the opportunity to allow your viewers into the webinar a little bit more so they can be more engaged. The final tip I'll give you right now about hosting a webinar is give yourself some time. Set a date, probably a month from now. Give yourself at least 4 weeks and go, this is where we're gonna host, when we're gonna host the webinar. This is who I'm gonna have join me on the webinar. This is the topic of the webinar, and have that all figured out when you set that date. Once you have that date set, start working your way back and going, okay, I need to send out invites at least 3 weeks in advance. I need to make sure that my form is set up. I need to make sure that my webinar software is set up. I need to make sure that any slides that I need prepared are prepared. There's, all of the things I talked about in this video, you want to make sure that you have prepared, but give yourself time. Don't feel like you need to go out right away, set up a webinar for 3 days from now and think it's going to be a roaring success. It's not. You need to give yourself some time. You need to give your invites time in order to carve out that time in their calendar. So make sure you give yourself some time, do some proper planning. And I hope this video helps you create, host, and premiere a successful first webinar for your accounting firm. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, we'd really appreciate it if you hit that thumbs up button. It helps us make sure that we're getting these videos in front of more accountants just like yourself. And if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell. We post every single week, always, about helping accountants elevate their marketing for their accounting firm so they can grow that firm. So thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.